scenarios to assist you in understanding the definition of workplace harassment and the resolution process. Try a few of the following scenarios to assist you in understanding the definition of workplace harassment and the resolution process. Try a few of the following scenarios to assist you in understanding. Try a few of the following scenarios to Try a few of the following scenarios. Try a few of the following scenarios to assist you in understanding the Try a few of the following scenarios to assist you in understanding the violence can affect all people in all jobs. Do you work with the public? Handle money, valuables, or prescription drugs? Carry out inspections or enforcement duties? Provide services, care, advice, or education? Work with unstable or volatile persons? Work where alcohol is served? Work alone? Or have a mobile workplace? To understand and control workplace violence, you must also consider all of the possible sources of violent behavior. Workplace violence and harassment may occur outside the formal workspace, at work-related social functions, conferences, or training sessions, in parking lots and other areas, and can include verbal, nonverbal, electronic, or written communications. Workplace violence can arise from a person inside the workplace, such as a coworker or manager, a person related to the function of the workplace, such as an employee, client, customer, contractor, or student, a person with an indirect relationship with the workplace, such as a spouse or partner of an employee or a former employee, or a person who is unrelated to the organization, such as a member of the public or a person with criminal intent. Workplace violence risk assessments were done in all York University work environments. Refer to this information to learn more about workplace violence in your work environment. Domestic violence is considered workplace violence because it can directly impact the workplace. Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Organizations must take reasonable precautions to address suspected domestic violence when there is the risk of it spilling over into the workplace. Everyone has a responsibility to act if there's someone at work who they suspect may be a victim of domestic violence. Under workplace violence and harassment legislation, employers must alert all workers of possible threats of workplace violence and harassment, which includes telling workers of persons they are likely to encounter who have histories of violent behavior. Sexual harassment includes unwelcome touching, patting, kissing, or other sexually suggestive physical contact by a supervisor or other worker, clients, vendors, or customers, and encouragement of harassment by others, including failure to report harassing conduct. The use of sexually specific terms, derogatory comments about women or men, and the female or male anatomy, or about a person's gender are also considered sexual harassment. Whether it is aimed at specific individuals or at the entire workforce, explicit sexual propositions, suggestive comments, sexual teasing, joking involving sexual content, comments, and questions about sexual attributes or behavior, foul or obscene pictures or printed material, obscene jokes, languages, or gestures can be considered harassment. Here are some examples of sexual harassment in the workplace. A manager who showers unwanted attention on a worker and seeks sexual favors in return, with the suggestion that to accept these advances will result in a more positive outcome for that worker, or the reverse. If these advances are refused, there could be a negative impact or outcome for that worker. Or behavior that interferes with a person's performance or creates a hostile work environment, such as a situation where someone aggressively and persistently tries to have an intimate relationship with a coworker against the person's wishes. Or a situation where men make anti-female comments to workers, such as suggesting that women don't belong in the workplace or are good only for certain jobs. Or similarly, a situation where men are subjected to harassment by women because of their gender. A workplace may be considered poisoned or hostile when harassment is directed at one employee or a group who may be identified by a particular characteristic, like age or gender, or it can be based on personal or psychological issues, like ganging up, mobbing, targeting, or bullying. A workplace is considered to have a poisoned work environment if harassment or other discriminatory conduct is prevalent enough to become, in effect, a condition of employment. For example, stereotyping, offensive remarks or jokes, inappropriate pin-ups, posters, emails, and other actions like this can negatively affect the work environment and undermine dignity and self-respect for workers. Office gossip, worksite joking, kidding, and banter, which initially appear harmless, welcome, or the accepted norm, can eventually or over time lead to or create a poisoned, uncomfortable, hostile, or intimidating work environment. The Occupational Health and Safety Act sets out roles and responsibilities for workplace parties to keep workplaces free from violence and harassment. Employers must maintain a harassment-free work environment and must take action if a worker is being harassed by another worker or a supervisor, customer, member of the public, agent of the employer, or contractor. Employers can be held liable for the actions of workers, particularly those in positions of authority, if they knew about violence or harassment or should have known and did nothing to stop it. Employers must take steps to assess the risk of violence in the workplace and establish policies and procedures to deal with incidents or potential incidents of violence. Employers must implement preventative or protective measures in the workplace for workers who may be subjected to violence at work from an abusive domestic partner. And the employer must advise workers if they are likely in the course of their work to encounter or deal with any individual with a history of violent incidents. Management can be held liable for the actions of workers if they knew or should have known that harassment was occurring or that there was a threat of violence but did nothing to stop it. Management must also provide input to assess specific risks of workplace violence for their faculties or departments and address any concerns in the workplace related to workplace violence and harassment. They must also fulfill the duties outlined in York University's workplace violence and workplace harassment programs. Employees are responsible for reporting any incidents of workplace violence or harassment and acting in a manner that contributes to a safe work environment free from workplace violence and harassment. Workers are responsible for their actions. Violent incidents in the workplace can result in discipline, criminal investigations leading to charges, trials, and criminal penalties including jail or prison sentences. It's important that you understand what constitutes workplace violence and know what to do about it. Please take some time to review York University's workplace violence and workplace harassment policies and programs, which are available on ULink. It is important that you report incidents of workplace violence or harassment that you experience or witness. This should be reported to your supervisor. For academic employees, report to your associate dean or designate. If you are not comfortable reporting this to your supervisor, report this to another supervisor, your union if applicable, or to Human Resources so that it can be investigated and resolved. This includes reporting domestic violence if it may result in violence in the workplace. For complaints that pose an immediate risk of physical injury, immediately call 911, then contact security services. Remain in a safe place and available to provide information for the investigation. In the case of harassment, ideally, the person being harassed tells the offender not to do it anymore because they find it offensive, unwelcome, or unwanted. However, they are not under an obligation to do so, especially if they have reason to feel afraid of the harasser. Even if the person being harassed does not verbally tell the harasser to stop, they can still express their discomfort or dislike through body language, such as turning or walking away from their harasser, frowning, crying, or even becoming angry or upset. Once a report has been made, the supervisor or associate dean will respond promptly by contacting security if personal safety is a concern, conducting an investigation, and implementing any interim measures to ensure the safety of everyone in the workplace. The incident will then be documented and reviewed to determine a formal resolution to the complaint. If necessary, the supervisor will contact other resources as needed to assist with resolving the issue. If the supervisor or associate dean is not able to resolve the issue can be referred to Human Resources. Where a formal investigation is required, the management supervisor will forward the complaint to the AVP of Human Resources to initiate an investigation. The investigation will be conducted by an investigator who has received specialized training in conducting workplace investigations. The investigation process will be fair, and the investigator will review and interview all parties involved, including witnesses. The respondent will be informed of any and all allegations and will be provided with the opportunity to respond. Results of the investigation will be reviewed to determine whether further action is warranted, and the outcome will be communicated to relevant parties in writing. Why is it important to report workplace violence and harassment? When an individual or group is being harassed, it can have a negative effect on the entire workplace. Workplace violence can have substantial impacts on people, including psychological trauma, stress, fatigue, illness and injuries, job loss, disabilities, poor productivity, and absenteeism. Workers who have been harassed or subject to violence are often afraid to report because they don't want to rock the boat or are afraid they won't be believed or taken seriously and might be disliked by their coworkers. They might also be afraid they'll be labeled as troublemakers, disciplined or dismissed, or that it will reflect badly on them in their current job or affect future opportunities. It's important to remember that the complaint resolution process will be treated confidentially and only persons with the need to know will be informed. York University's workplace violence and workplace harassment prevention programs include York University's commitment to protect all persons working for York University and to take all reasonable precautions to prevent workplace violence and harassment, solutions to address the risk of violence or harassment, procedures for the reporting and investigation of incidents or complaints, and measures to discipline anyone who engages in workplace violence or harassment. A worker may refuse to work where they have reason to believe that they are in danger of being a target of workplace violence. Such a refusal would trigger the normal work refusal process under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Workers in jobs where an unsafe condition is inherent in the work or a normal condition of employment, as specified in the Act, would not be allowed to refuse work. There is no right to refuse work where harassment is believed likely to endanger the health and safety of a worker. Workplace violence can affect all employees. It is everyone's right to work in an environment free from violence and harassment. Workplace violence can be broadly defined with respect to both the types of behaviors and the sources of behaviors. Employers have a legal obligation to protect employees from workplace violence. However, we all share responsibility for contributing to a workplace free from violence, harassment, and discrimination. Preventing injury and illness at work starts here with the things you have learned in this module, but it doesn't end here. Use what you learned here and additional specific training for the work that you do to ensure workplace safety. Remember that everyone has a role to play in health and safety. If you find a hazard, report it to your supervisor immediately. How you work and the way you think and talk about work can affect the safety of the people you work with. Be a role model for good health and safety practices. As a new employee or supervisor, take some time to figure out what further information you need to ensure safety on the job. Use the information available in the workplace, like the health and safety policies and procedures, information sheets that come with hazardous materials, operating manuals for equipment, and recommendations from joint health and safety committees and health and safety professionals. Use the internal and external resources discussed to get the answers you need. Joint health and safety committees, area health and safety officers, and the health safety employee well-being team internally and externally Ontario's health and safety system, including the Ministry of Labour. Some links have been provided here if you want further information.